Okay, so we are back to the crankcase of the engine that we took the transmission apart for. So before we go putting the transmission back together, I'm going to take the crankcase apart so we can confirm what parts are needed in it. So to start, I'm just going to take these gaskets off. This is where the transmission mounts, on these three studs. There's a fourth stud on the transmission that goes through this hole. There's two dowels here. So I'm going to pull these old gaskets off here. These gaskets, there's more than one. Besides sealing the transmission, there's a couple of them at least. No, at least one anyway. But there can be, yeah, there's at least two. There's two there, more than two, there's three there. Okay, so there's at least three. According to the manual, the Villiers engine manual, if you need more than 4 gaskets between the engine and transmission to set the amount of slack in the primary chain between the engine and transmission, then the chain is worn and needs to be replaced. So I'll actually go back on the video to see if I check the chain to see what kind of slack there was, and I would probably assemble the transmission to the engine first time with 4 gaskets and see if the chain's too tight, and then make a call. Anyway, so there are 3 gaskets that came off of there, so we could possibly put another gasket on there and still be within specs in the manual, as long as the chain isn't either too tight or too loose. If it's too tight with 4 gaskets, of course, we'd take 1 gasket out and only use 3. Okay, so we have that gasket off. We might as well, while we're pulling old gaskets off, I don't know if you can see here, to keep the connecting rod from hitting against the crankcase, I just put some rubber bands around the studs. I'm just going to take those off, take these nuts off of here and washers, and then take this old gasket off of here. At some point we'll be separating the 2 halves of the crankcase, and the gasket will be in the way, and we're not going to reuse this gasket anyway, so we might as well just pull it off of here. Take all the nuts and washers off here. Just pull this gasket off of here. It's brittle and coming apart in pieces, but that's fine, we're not going to reuse it. And while we're right here, I'm going to do a check here. Checking to see how much play there is in the, what they call the big end bearing in the connecting rod. There's a bit there, and I actually checked the manual before I started, and there's no specification for side play. They want you to check for up and down movement. I don't think I feel any there. Just doing it with the crankshaft at different positions, top dead center and halfway between top dead center and bottom dead center. Now bottom dead center. I would say I do not feel any play there. Okay, so I'm just going to put the nuts and washers back on. Actually, I'll just go ahead and put these rubber bands on. So what I did is I just put the rubber band over a stud, over the connecting rod, around one stud, and then onto the other stud, just to, so over a stud, over the connecting rod, around a stud, and over another stud, just to again to hold the connecting rod from hitting against the crankcase so it doesn't mark the crankcase, leaving a burr which would affect the gasket. Now the crankcase in these engines, of course, has to be sealed because they're two-stroke engines. So the fuel mixture, before it goes into the cylinder, why is that not being stubborn? Before the fuel goes into the cylinder to be burned, it gets drawn past through the air gets drawn through the carburetor, mixes with the fuel, and is drawn into the crankcase. And then when the piston goes down, the fuel mixture is pushed up the transfer ports on the side into the cylinder, and then when the piston comes up, the spark occurs just before top dead center, and we have ignition, and that's what drives the piston back down again. For some reason that nut doesn't like that stud. One of them just came off of there. I'll put it on as far as it'll go, and I'll have to check and clean that up at some point. There's also a gasket right here that is firmly stuck, but it won't interfere with the separation of the crankcase halves. If we get into that at this spot now, yeah, that's firmly stuck. I'm not going to play with that right now. So we have the gaskets off. So now I'm going to take the stator for the Dynastart off. This is the SEBA Dynastart stator. It's held to the crankcase by 3 Allen head screws. Got an Allen wrench. I'm just going to try it here and see how snug these are. Fairly snug, but it came off just with a regular wrench. I do have a torque multiplier here if I needed it, but I decided to try it without. So I'm going to take that screw right out. And since there are 3 screws holding this in position, I would say it's safe to assume that this will only go back on in one way, and there should be a washer there. There is a washer there. There's the screw. Pull the washer off. Oh, and I haven't got my my zippy bags ready. Anyway, I'll get all 3 of these out. Well, I'll see if I can get all 3 of these out, and then I'll go looking for a bag to put them in. Okay, so number 2. This one's at the bottom. It's pretty rusty around it. Let's see. Because I'm pulling on it, and my thumb is right near that crankshaft, I'm going to try a little torque multiplier here to get my hand out a little bit from the nut. That's not snapping loose. Okay, and one thing you have to be careful when you're using an Allen head wrench, and an Allen head screw, is make sure the head of the screw is clean, and the wrench is in the screw as far as it will go. Because with fasteners that are tight, things can slip, and because the head of the screw isn't really accessible, once the head's stripped, it's going to be hard to get it apart. Okay, there's 2. I'm going to leave the more challenging one for the last. Now, the wiring here is connected to the stator. There's the washer too. So this wiring is connected to this stator, and it goes through a grommet. There's an outer case here, and there are 4 screws, I believe, that hold the outer case to the crankcase. But we'll have to pull the stator partway off, feed the wires in a bit, and then take the screws out to get this half off to get the wiring. Anyway, we'll see how it goes if this other screw doesn't want to come out. I'm just going to try giving that a gentle tap to make sure it's bottomed. Our torque multiplying device on here, also called a cheater pipe. There, that felt like it loosened. Yes, it did. Okay. So the screws. Oops, sorry. I'm going to kick the camera over there. So the last screw out. And the washer. Now, just going to find my zip bag. Just a minute. I'll be right back. Okay, so I found my supply of zipper bags here. I'll just put these screws in it. In one of these bags, I should say. Okay, so 1, 2, 3 screws. That rotor should be loose. Well, in a manner of speaking. Now, I don't expect it to fall off, but I have to try to remove it gently. So again, don't want to break anything. Just trying a gentle pry in a couple of spots with the screwdriver against the steel pole shoes here, just to see if it's got any indication that it's going to move. And I'm not seeing anything. This wiring, of course, which is going to come off when we get this stator off, is in the way. Yeah, I think I felt a little movement there. Of course, now that we have this is not mounted in our stand anymore, it's jumping around all over the place as I try to hit it. But I'm going to try something a little different here. I'm going to try my dead blow hammer. It's got, again, it's soft face, it's got lead shot in it so it doesn't bounce when you hit stuff with it. I'm just going to give this a few taps and see. Again, I don't expect it to fall off. I think it's a fairly precise fit on the crankcase. But I would rather try gently and have it come off slowly and use a lot of force and have it bounce off and end up broken. Now, I can see that this nut is going to be in our way here. So I'm going to pull that off. This is going to be interesting to hold. The nut shouldn't be tight. There we go. Just holding down on the connecting rod to hold the crankshaft from turning, because again, this nut, there's no need for it to be really tight. So we'll just do only one nut like that, but we'll put it in the bag so it doesn't wander away. Put the ratchet away. Let me try a little bit of an impact here. If I can hold the crankshaft. Sorry, the crankcase. I thought I felt this move, but I could be mistaken. I don't want to pry directly in behind the stator because of the all the wiring in behind it. Putting the screwdriver against the pole shoe and so I went and got my heavy vise, stood the crankcase on its end so that I can get at the rotor, sorry, the stator, and I went and got a pry bar to work with my hammer, and on two of the beefier sides of the crankcase here, the pry bar and the screwdriver on each side, and lo and behold, there it comes. So now I need to give it some slack. These wires, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 wires here in this grommet. Now push them in the grommet as I raise the stator here. I don't need the pry bar, I don't think, anymore, so I'm just going to support it with my hand. One hand as I push the wires in with the other. And of course, all of these wires are the same color. One of them is a different size, but right there is the stator off of the crankcase, and we can see a lovely ball of rust underneath it. And what we can see if I can point it out here, there are 4 countersunk screws here that you can't see at this angle, but they're all rusty. So what I'm going to do is just take a small screwdriver, jeweler's screwdriver, and clean the heads as best I can. Four of them here. And then you take the impact tool, the screwdriver bit that best fits those slots, like the bigger one does, and I'm going to see if these screws are going to come out. That bit is almost too big. I'm going to try it very carefully. So if anybody hasn't used one of these impact tools, it's really handy. It's got a beefy screwdriver bit in it. Put the screwdriver bit in, turn, make sure the tool is turning the right way, a little tension on it, give it a tap of the hammer. No, that slipped. That bit isn't the right size. Bit's a little big, so it doesn't fit right down in the slot. So hopefully I haven't damaged that to the point where it will come out. If that won't come out, that's going to be fun to get out. No, I'll come back to that. Again, the more challenging one. Hopefully that's the most challenging one, so we'll try this one. Broke the bit. Okay, before I give up, and I'm not one to easily give up, I guess, I tried the larger bit in the screws, which are the top screws, and they broke loose. So those are the screws we're taking out. They've got very shallow heads, and the screw slots aren't that deep. So that one I managed to loosen. This one, of course, as you can see by the fact that I'm spinning the tool rather easily, that one loosened. So I'm just going to try very carefully. The one that broke the bit, make sure the bit is in squarely, and just there we go. So that's the one that broke the smaller bit. It came out, and I did do a little bit of damage to that screw head, so I'll have to put screws on the list of things to get. Now, this partially mangled screw. Okay. Screwdriver bit squarely in this head of the screw. Well, it has decided to come out. I was worried I might have to get into desperate measures because, as you may see there, I did mangle the head of that pretty good. So we'll have to get some new screws for that. So now this side cover here should be loose, or should come loose, I should say. I'll just give it a gentle tap here, or two. And this cover, the cable goes through it, and the cable goes through it, and it locks the grommet. The grommet goes in here. So now we have the stator off with its maze of wiring, and I'll just separate it here from the cover. There's the cover. Stator is off. That's going to need some bit of cleaning. And now we're down to what is pretty much a bare crankcase with, of course, the crankshaft in it. And to separate the crankshaft, the crankcase halves, pardon me, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Can't be right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And take it out of the vise here. Check the other side. I'll just dump the dirt that was in there off. Oh. So there's 5 showing on one side. 3, 4. That's a stud. That's a drain plug. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there's studs and nuts that go all the way through. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So those nuts will have to come off, and then we'll just check and see if there has to be any heat used to pull this apart. So that's the bare crankcase with the crankshaft in it. Of course, the connecting rod's still in there, and quite a bit of rust in there. Gasket on this side is going to have to come off. Anyway, I'm going to clear some of this stuff away and see if we can get this a little further apart. Okay, so we're back. I've done a little cleaning up and taken away the stuff that I don't think we're going to need. And I've broken out the manual. I've broken out the Villiers Road Vehicle Engines and Maintenance Manual and turned to the section on the crankcase. Now, it says to unscrew the 5 fixing nuts on the side of the crankcase and push out the studs, 2 of which are a close fit to act as dowels. Then the right hand crankcase half should come away. So that would be the side opposite what we're seeing here. So it should be this side, the side that the stator was just on. So we'll take the studs off, sorry, the nuts off the studs, give the studs a little push and see what happens. Now, I haven't gone ahead and loosened anything, but these shouldn't be too difficult to take off. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, take them all off the side. 2. Just loosen them all a little bit. That's the drain plug. I don't need to loosen it. Okay, so they're all loose. And I have a zip-doo-dah bag here, all ready to put these into. Not studs coming out. Oop. Get rid of this torque multiplier, I don't need it. Okay, so that stud does not appear to be one of the ones that act as the dowels. So there's the stud and the nut and washer. So there's one. This one here. Here's the extension as like a nut driver here. And oh, that was going to take a little tap. Oh, and that was the hammer falling on my foot. Now the washer's still there. Now these studs have a fairly good crown on them, which means the end of them is rounded pretty good. So I'm hoping that I'm not mushrooming the threads here. And my punch is a little too big. That's the hammer I dropped on my foot. Okay, so that stud is in as far as it will go. So there's the washer. The nut is in the socket. One in the middle here. And that's another loose one. I'm thinking that one there is one of the ones that acts as a dowel. And I'm guessing that one will be at one too. Just guessing. I can't actually say that I've had these crankcases apart before. That's why I went to the manual. Okay, so that stud came out easily. I took the nut off and it was loose, so I just pulled the stud through. This one actually, the nut came off the back side of it. And probably be fairly easy to tell when we put these back on, but the studs aren't the same length. Should be fairly easy to get them right back in the right order, or the right locations, I should say. Okay, so we have one more, and this one I said I thought would be another tight one. In which case, yeah, it's not turning as I take the nut off. Got the nut there, washer. Just put gently on the studs. Tap this gently. Stud is moving, but as it said in the manual, it's a snug fit. Yeah, my punch is too big to go through the hole, so I'm going to have to get a slightly smaller punch. Be right back. Don't go away. Okay, I got a slightly smaller punch. I actually got a punch set. And the next one down in size is right here. So I'll go back to one at the back here. hit it too hard, it's coming out. It's just a little snug. Now, not sure if the studs are actually different or if the holes machined different. So I'll want to keep these two studs separate. There's the other stud, it came out. And the nut's threading on easily with my fingers. This one, yeah, this one's going on. Sorry, not in the camera there. So this one's going on, so I didn't mushroom the threads with the punch. And just for giggles, as they say, let's see if one of these other studs it's the hole is machined differently, so it looks like the studs are the same, but because I'm not 100% sure, I'm going to put those, I'll get another bag and put them in a bag inside this bag so that I know they're special. Okay, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 studs out, and apparently, oh, look at that. Now my rubber bands are holding things together. Of course, when I went to pick up the crankcase, it came apart. So, just like they said in the book, there's the right side crankcase, and we can find something to wipe the bearing surface with. There's two sets of bearings. There's a set here and a set here. That crankshaft is quite long. And that, the outer race, or the outer part, is it's a little dark, but it looks smooth. And I'm looking just to see if I can see why. And I'm laughing because I think I just found out why. The crankshaft was noisy when it was being rotated. I think I found out why. I don't know if you can see it, but there is a healthy layer of rust and some pitting on that outer race. And there's actually, that's not really a surprise, because looking at this bearing, that bearing is very rusty. So, what do we got here? That looks like, you can't see it in my greasy hand here. I think if I got the piston, I would think that would be part of the piston. Because that, just rotating the crankshaft here to listen to this other bearing. Okay, sorry, a little technical problem there. Anyway, so that, I think, is the source of our bearing noise. That bearing is very rusty, and it's not a tapered bearing. It's a set of cylindrical roller bearings. The bearing next to it appears to be in very good shape. The rollers aren't rusty, pitted, and if we spin the crankshaft using the connecting rod, there's a wee bit of noise there. It's certainly not what there was with this in that housing. And now, with the crankcase split, if you can see it here, this is the connecting rod here. This connecting rod. This is where the crank pin, where the connecting rod joins, and there are slots in the connecting rod to allow oil in at the bearings. There are roller bearings, much the same as these, and they look similar, but they're a different size. I'm just looking to see what they look like, and they look, all I can see, nice and shiny. Sorry, it's hard to show them in the camera while I'm looking here. And the fun part of this is, this being a two-stroke engine, some two-stroke engines have needler roller bearings in the bottom of the connecting rod. They don't all have them. Some just have a bushing there. But the connecting rod is one piece, which means if those bearings need to be changed, the crankshaft has to come apart. And the crankshaft is three pieces. It's what they call in the book a drive shaft. This is one drive shaft, and to the weight, and then there's a drive shaft to the weight on this side, and then there's a pin between. And if you have a really heavy press, you can take this apart, actually put an oversized crank pin in it, put a new bearing and possibly a new connecting rod in it if need be, and that's a rebuilt crank. Now, of course, there's some equipment required for that. First of all, you have to have a press heavy enough to press the pin out, because this has to go together with enough force that nothing will slip, because the forces on this one is running. The stator, the rotor is acting as a flywheel, so when the engine is not under power, which means after the piston goes to bottom dead center, the weight of the flywheel, or the rotor, is pushing is continuing to rotate the crankshaft because of momentum, and as the piston nears top dead center, the spark occurs, so it lights the fuel air mixture, and that pushes the piston down and the connecting rod and rotates the crank. So the weight of the flywheel out here, or the rotor, is trying to maintain a constant speed because it's heavy. It's turning the crankshaft half a rotation when it's not under power. There's a load of the chain on the other side which is driving the machine, and this is speeding up and slowing down, so there's quite a lot of shocking, and it's trying to twist everything one way then the other. So anyway, this has to go together with a lot of force, so you need a big press. And then when you press it back together, everything has to be lined up, so that, because you've got two drive shafts, one going through each bearing, and if you have them lined up incorrectly, they're trying to do this, so they have to be lined up right through here. And if you don't line this up, if you have one of these off a little bit, it won't work very well. Try to bend everything, so besides the press, you have to be knowledgeable and put everything back lined up so that this shaft isn't going out of its circle. It would turn within the bearing, it wouldn't be pushing on the bearing. Anyway, I think that bearing is okay. It may not be as new. I don't feel any up and down play in it. There's a bit of side to side play in it. I'm still checking here because I'm feeling something, but I'm not convinced it's up and down movement. Anyway, we do know at least that this bearing needs to be replaced, for sure. But if we get into changing that bearing, it's a whole other ball of wax, as they say. It means the crankshaft has to come apart, possibly an oversized crank pin, possibly a new connecting rod, and a of course, a new bearing to match. But anyway, I'll do some digging, clean this up so it can be looked at better. Take this bearing off. This bearing, now this collar here, I'm not going to try prying on it. I'm going to again consult the book. Actually, it's split. It's split here and not here, so it must have to slide off. So that's not going to come off unless this bearing's off. And to get this bearing off, I'll use the bearing splitter I used to take the bearing off of the output shaft of the transmission. Put the bearing splitter on there, set this carefully in the hydraulic press, or use a couple of bolts to push the crankshaft out of the bearing, and then the outer half of this bearing right here is going to have to come out too. That should just be a matter of setting this on a firm surface to support it here and tapping this bearing out. Now, this is another case where some heat applied to this would help expand this part a little more than the steel, so this would come out a little easier. But it's going to get cleaned up before I do anything else with it, because it's covered in oil and rust and all kinds of fun stuff. Anyway, that's as far as we're going to go on this today. Sorry, just one other thing I noticed before I started cleaning up. On the crankcase, this is the depression in the casting where the float bowl of the carburetor sits, and this is a drain, just in case the carburetor overflows. And this is full of corrosion, which is just part of the cleaning up. But anyway, that's if you have the engine in the machine and you have the carburetor out, you can see this hole when the carburetor's out. If you take a piece of soft wire and just make sure that that's clean, just in case. On a motorcycle, of course, anything that overflowed from the carburetor would end up on the ground, but on these machines it ends up in the engine compartment or bilge. But anyway, that's something that'll be cleaned up. This whole thing's going to be cleaned up. I just thought I'd point that out. Okay, so what I did here, or what I'm doing here, I guess, I've put the bearing splitter in behind the bearing on the left hand end of the crankshaft. That's the rusty one that was in behind the, yes, actually that's the right hand crankshaft. That's the rusty bearing that was in behind the stator. So I put the bearing splitter on and I snugged it down just by hand to clamp in behind the bearing, and I put a two-legged puller on the studs of the bearing splitter. There are holes drilled here that you can use another puller on to pull it off, or you could put this in a hydraulic press, but with the crankcase and crankshaft here, I don't think it'll fit in my hydraulic press, so I'm going to try to use this setup and see what happens. So what we're trying to do, and it doesn't seem like it's moving, is pull a bearing, a very rusty bearing, off, and this setup probably isn't one that's in the shop manuals anyway. I put a bit of tension on this, and what I'm going to do is just give it a slap here with the hammer. Sometimes putting a little tension on it and giving it a little slap with the hammer will get things to move. That felt like it had loosened up again. And actually, yes, I can see light between my my bearing splitter on the collar at the back here, so I believe that bearing's moving, and this does not feel like it's getting really tight. It does seem to be moving, so sounds like it's coming apart. Now, I haven't taken the Woodruff key off the crankshaft. I took a look down at it from the right angle, and I think the bearing should come off without getting fouled on the Woodruff key. Yes, things seem to be moving. The Woodruff key is still a quarter inch away from the bearing. I think the bearing will be onto the taper, so it may clear. I'll have to make sure I stop before it gets right up against it, because of it. If I pull the bearing into the Woodruff key, and the Woodruff key is in the way, then I'll have to drive the bearing back out of the way and get the Woodruff key out. So just about at the Woodruff key there, and there the bearing is, everything's gotten really loose. Okay, so the bearing pretty much fell off. Yeah, and that's one rusty bearing. There's numbers on it, patent number. Anyway, the folks who supplied the bearings, or supplied the Villiers parts, should know what that is. I may have to clean it up just to see. I read something about different sizes of these. They're slightly undersized. Hopefully it's not something that's inked on there, because that, if I clean anything off of there to see it, it's going to take any marking off it. But anyway, there's the bearing off of the crankshaft. And that collar, whatever it is for, I'll have to read the manual and see. And it's a little bit of noise there yet, but now we get this out of the way. I'll bring the vise up, set the crankcase half that's missing off of here, apply some heat to it, and see if the outer bearing for this will come out. Be right back. Okay, so I've set the right crankcase half up on the vise, and what I did first was put the end of the crankcase I want to support with the vise against the vise, and open the jaws up until they just cleared this bearing. So what I'm going to do is just set this up here, take my heat gun, and heat this area for, well, a friend of mine used to say, go away and smoke 2 cigarettes and it'll be heated up. I don't smoke, so I can't time stuff with cigarettes, so what I'm going to do is turn the heat gun on, play a couple of Stevie Ray Vaughan songs, and then I'll turn it over. I'll come back, I'll turn it over, and I'll tap it with the punch and see if it's going to come apart for us. Anyway, so I'm just going to heat it up and play the music while we're not on camera here, and I'll come back when the 2 songs are over. Be right back. Okay, so I heated this for about the length of 2 songs. This is going to be very hot, especially in this area. It's warm out here. Ooh, that is warm. I should be wearing gloves. I'm not. Okay, so put it on the vise so that the outer race can go down between the jaws. I'm just going to give it a few taps here. Now there's actually a snap ring in there, so I don't want to try to tap against the snap ring. And I'm going to be careful, because when that falls out of there, it's going to be warm. And I've prepared for this by wearing my heat resistant sandals, so when that bearing race is coming out, there, that bearing race is out with not a whole lot of force. So that's very warm. Bearing race is out. And even this stud is warm to my hand, and there's a snap ring in there to stop that bearing race from going in too far. And there's the bearing race. Out. So we'll just let that cool. Now I think we're as far apart as we're going to go on this today. Next step should be a bunch of cleaning. I'll have to decide whether I want to pull the crankshaft out of the other side of the crankcase and get a look at the bearings on that side to see if they're rusty and rough. Anyway, we'll stop right there for now. Okay, well, I took a quick look at the manual, and it doesn't appear that it's that difficult to remove the crankshaft from what they call the drive side of the crankcase, which is the left side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this seal, which should be that simple. Just pried it out with a screwdriver. That screwdriver is a little big, and that seal is going to be changed. But anyway, the seal is out. So what I'm going to do again is heat this, and I want the bearing is here, and there's another bearing down in below. So I want to heat this pretty good. Again, I think the manual says put it in an oven at 200 degrees. I'm going to try the heat gun again for 2 songs of my favorite guitars here. And the other side of the case got pretty warm, so hopefully that'll get this warm enough. It'll expand enough to release the pressure on the bearings, and the bearings will come out with the crankshaft. Anyway, I'm just going to shut the camera off again, heat this up while I'm listening to some music. As I said, I don't smoke, and I'll come back with the softer faced mallet, and hopefully we'll take the crankshaft out and we'll get a look at the bearings and get a good feel of them to see if they need to be replaced. Might as well take it all apart and check it over instead of putting it back together wondering, should we have changed those? Okay, so I'm going to step off here and heat this up. Okay, so I've heated that up. Sitting on the vise. It's got a little bit of clearance to go down before it hits the vise. And as you saw, I was directing the heat down at the base of the crankcase where the lower bearing is. And I see movement. Let's move this out just enough that the spacer will clear the vise. Now, put 1 glove on. I should have put 2 on because this is going to be warm. But as you probably saw there, the crankshaft is free of the crankcase. So there's the crankcase with 1 bearing in it. 1 bearing in it. The other bearing has stayed on the crankshaft with the spacer. Anyway, this is going to be warm. I'm not going to take my gloves off and find out. But anyway, there's the crank shaft. There's the crankshaft, as it would be in the machine. If you were sitting in the machine, this is the right hand side where the Dynastart rotor would have gone, or where it goes. Actually, this is tapered here. This isn't tapered. So this side has the cylindrical bearings on it, and this has ball bearings on it. They call this the drive side because this is the side the chain's on. But anyway, we've taken the outer bearing off here. The inner bearing looks good. That inner bearing's not making any noise, but when it cools down, I'll put my bare fingers on it and see how it feels. And this bearing there's a snap ring. Yeah, there's this. The reason that bearing didn't come out is because there's a snap ring there, and it may be hard to see here. I'll take my glove off. The pointing device. There is a snap ring here, and then there's a space, and then there's a step here where the other bearing went. So the two bearings on this side are different sizes. So this one that sits here is a larger outer diameter than this one. And to take this bearing out, and maybe what I'll do is I'll grab the snap ring pliers right now while that's still warm, and pull that snap ring out. Put the gloves on. We'll pull that out while it's still warm. The bearing may come out willingly. I'm just going to put this crankshaft down where it can't fall, because I want to close this vise up a bit. Actually, that's probably lots. So I've actually got the wrong snap ring pliers, but if I take the time to look for the right ones, this is going to be cooled down. So we'll just use these the wrong way. If they'll work. I've got a set for an external snap ring, and what I'm trying to remove is an internal snap ring, and with these gloves on it's a little awkward, but I have to remember the case is warm and the case is not sitting solidly in the vise, so I just want to close that snap ring a little bit so it will come up in the groove a little, and it doesn't want to cooperate. Let's try plan B. Okay, so I found a pair of pliers, not these ones. I was able to get the snap ring started up out of the groove, so just use these pliers to guide this a little bit so it doesn't go flying off into the darkness here. There we go. So there's the snap ring out. And while I was looking for pliers, I tightened this up a little bit. So I'm going to put the gloves back on. Hopefully this is still warm enough. Put it on the jaws of the vise. Use this soft-faced hammer on the punch. Yeah, that bearing's going. Well, it was going. There we go. Now, that bearing may be reused, so I don't want to drop it into a bunch of... Ow! It's going to be cleaned anyway, but I'm just going to put something soft there to catch it. There we go. That other bearing is out. So there's the drive side crankcase, the left side of the crankcase, bare of any moving parts. That's probably a little warm. There's the bearing, which has been fairly well coated with penetrating oil. Ooh. Yeah, that doesn't feel good at all. That does not feel good at all. That's going to get cleaned in solvent, but I think that's going to get a new bearing. That feels... It's not even turning. It goes that far, stops. And I didn't use that much force to take it out, so I don't think... I'd be quick to take the blame if I thought I was, but that bearing doesn't feel good at all. Anyway, it looks like a simple roller bearing. Hoffman, England. 120 V3. Anyway, unless there's a piece of crud in that locking it up. Anyway, I'll clean it up and see and get a look at it and see if it is rusty. But yeah, that bearing's terrible. And the inner bearing, that spins nice and free. And is it the same? 320 V3. So that's the same bearing as the one that was out here that didn't seem to want to turn. Anyway, if those bearings are inexpensive, we'll change them. This bearing here, the rollers look nice and clean. It may stay there. This is going to have to get cleaned up for the new bearing to go on the end of that. That bearing, one that's off of there, is definitely going to be changed. And I'm not sure if I'm feeling up and down play in that. I'm really hesitant to say I am, because if there's play in that, and that bearing's got to be changed, that's a lot of work that I can't do, which means expense in labor and parts. Anyway, it feels smooth, but we don't want any up and down play. That would cause a rattle in the engine. Anyway, there. Now that's as far apart as we're going to take it this trip. We've got the crankcase there of all the bearings we're going to take out of it, I think. And we're just going to do some cleaning up and checking of components before we are absolutely sure of what we're going to order. But at that point we'll have everything clean and ready to go back together, and actually do have some parts here. For example, the bearing in the transmission, that could start reassembly of the transmission. But anyway, cleaning and confirmation of parts required coming up.